Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Her Excellency Speaker of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, Madame Victoria Clemente Nielsen, my friends and colleagues and partners at the Vytautas Magnus University, the hosts of today's events. It is a distinct honor and a privilege for me to have the chance to be here today in such a historic building, which has seen so much leadership and innovation from Lithuania throughout decades, that we have a chance to host this special event at this exact time here in this historic place. Ladies and gentlemen, when we open the newspaper or we turn on the TV, we're confronted with, unfortunately, very sad images as we look at Russia, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, the tremendous division of the United Kingdom with Brexit, the unhealthy division of the United States amongst lines of Democrats and Republicans, the rise of nationalist parties across Europe and across the world. We're looking at images of fragmentation, images of distrust, images of division. It's a very fragile framework for us to be talking about cultural diplomacy. As I was listening to the open remarks of the other speakers, I was reminded of an important book initially published in 2005 by the American historian Richard Arendt. The book was called The First Resort of Kings, American Cultural Diplomacy in the 20th Century. The main point of Richard Arendt was that traditionally, the last resort of kings was supposed to be war and conflicts. Therefore, by default, the first resort of kings, or you could say of today's nation state, should actually be diplomacy. And his point is cultural diplomacy. What better time than now, again, as we look at the world, to discuss cultural diplomacy and also Lithuanian cultural diplomacy? What opportunities does this country have right now to start preparing for hopefully the time after war, and also to discuss and to try to build bridges even when it seems impossible, even during a framework of war? I define cultural diplomacy very simply in 6 words. I say cultural diplomacy is how do we educate, enhance, and sustain relationships with the goal of building dialogue, understanding, and trust. So the goal isn't that we agree. The goal isn't even that we're friends, although it's better if we are. The goal is to that very simple, that maybe naive idea, building trust. We have to understand the other, whether they're our friends or whether they're our enemies. And if you think about it, it's actually more important with our enemies. The initial response when one has war, let's block, let's cancel, let's not discuss the other, which is actually the worst thing you can do. At times of conflicts, you should really embrace the other any way you can. If you can't do it politically, if you can't do it economically, maybe culturally. Let's see how artists, academics cannot bring barriers, but also build bridges. As we look at examples of the 20th century, different countries have dealt with cultural diplomacy very differently. Unfortunately, my own country, the USA, made the mistake, I would say, at the end of the Cold War, where they said, okay, mission accomplished, Cold War is over, no more need. They closed all of the America houses in Germany and abroad, and you saw a drastic cut in cultural diplomacy. Unfortunately, that continued even during the Obama administration, where there were drastic cuts to Fulbright. Of course, Donald Trump was very much the idea of reducing and limiting cultural diplomacy in any way, shape, or form. So at a time now when we actually need, especially not only American cultural diplomacy, but around the world, they're doing less compared to, let's say, the Cold War, where cultural diplomacy and the jazz ambassadors were, of course, very well known. Japan noticed in the 1970s that this is an important thing. They began in 1972 with the Japan Foundation and really the creation of Japanese civil society. China, in 2004, started the Confucius Institute. And amongst many controversies, mistakes, or let's say not ideal applications of cultural diplomacy, they're now the fastest growing cultural diplomacy institution in the world. And at a time where some institutions are making it very expensive to learn their language or have access to their country, China's doing the opposite. China's going to public schools in Chicago and offering Chinese for free. So you don't even have to go to the Alliance Française or go to, etc. They're coming to you. They always say the Chinese are planning for 500 years, not for 5 years. And we need to think along those lines. How do we prepare for not only the current moment, but let's say Europe and the world in 5 years or in 10 years? Germany, the country where I've been the last 22 years, is an interesting example. Historically speaking, since the end of the Second World War, Germany didn't really have a choice, but they were about soft power. The world wouldn't allow this troublemaker, so to speak, to be a military power anymore. But that actually was a great opportunity for Germany, and it allowed Germany to have tremendous consistency with its foreign policy and its cultural policy. Joseph Nye at Harvard University would say that's essential. You can't be sending drones with one hand and jazz musicians with the other hand. You need consistency. The office of the prime minister needs to work work with the parliament, needs to work with the foreign ministry. It all needs to go together. As former Secretary of State Clinton would say, multi-dimensional chess. That multi-dimensional chess game really needs to happen in a 3D way. Today we find ourselves here in Vilnius in Lithuania, where I think also Lithuania has a wonderful opportunity. I'm very excited to hear not only about the initiative, or to learn about the initiative of the Vitatus Magnus University, but also the Office of the Prime Minister, as well as the other agencies, also the Parliament, which right now is asking the question, what can Lithuania do now in terms of cultural diplomacy within Lithuania, within the European framework and beyond? And I think it's a very exciting opportunity. I don't have the answers for you, but I do have many questions, and I think the opportunity that we have today is to pose those questions, exchange, brainstorm, with the hope not only of having good discussions, but I would be very, very grateful if we can be part of initiatives and other concrete results that might come as a catalyst for this event. To close, I was actually just thinking, as we again looking at Russia and Ukraine, and should we be blocking, should we be building bridges, should we speak to enemies, should we not speak to enemies? I was reminded of the great Dr. Eckhard Straßenschulte. He's the former director of the European Academy of Berlin. I recently had a chance to be with him. He spoke to a group of students we had in the European Commission in Berlin, and he was talking about the birth of the European Union and one of the main goals of the European Union. And he gave the example, when you're flipping through the TV and you turn stations, sometimes you'll open the TV and you'll see a boxing match, two boxers in the middle of some struggle. And very often you'll see it looks like the boxers are almost hugging each other. And if you don't know what happened before or after, you say, oh, great, they get along well, they're hugging. But of course, that's not the case. As we all know, that's one of the tactics in boxing to avoid the other person from hitting you. And he said that's the way it was with Germany and the European Union. The European Union said, let's give a big hug to Germany and make it not possible for Germany to hit us again. And I think let's just keep that in mind as we talk about, again, what should we do, Ukraine, Russia, etc. Should we just be blocking? Should we just be, fighting? Or are there maybe opportunities somehow, I don't know what those opportunities are, through cultural diplomacy to embrace the other? Whether it's artists, whether it's musicians, whether it's scientists, etc. How can we try to, again, prepare ourselves, hopefully, for a situation when the war has come to a cease? And how might we be able to hug the Ukrainians? How might we be able to hug Russians? How might we be able to hug also our European brothers and sisters all around us in a way that we can have strength and move forward? So I leave that maybe as a way of provoking you, maybe as a way of inspiring you, but I think we do have excellent opportunities right now to build bridges all across the world. And I very much look forward to the lectures and the discussions that come, and hopefully we can build some of those bridges already in the near future. Thank you very much.